Hey everyone, this is Ben Hansen, the former host of Syfy Channel's TV show Fact or Fake Paranormal Files. A lot of people have been asking me to do an analysis on an interview that President Obama gave on Jimmy Kimmel Live on March 12, 2015. Kimmel asked the president if he had any knowledge of the UFO and alien subjects. Now, I did another analysis on former President Bill Clinton's interview with Kimmel from April 2, 2014. That video received quite a bit of attention, so you can see it on my channel and use it for comparison because we're going to be referring to it a lot. Those of you who have seen the Clinton video know that I spent a great amount of time breaking down the former president's nonverbal communication and verbal responses. If you'd like a full picture of how this works, I'd suggest you go and watch the other video as well before you form any concrete conclusions. At the beginning of that video, I made a lot of disclaimers that I'm just going to summarize this time. I just want you to keep in mind that the opinions expressed during this analysis are my own and are in no way connected to my former employment with the government or any other employer. Nonverbal communication and content statement analysis are not exact sciences. There are several ways to interpret any given observation, so it's important to take into account the whole context of the exchange and personal habits of the individual. I'm also not considered an expert in the field of nonverbal language. With my background in criminal investigations, you could say that I'm just a guy with lots of experience conducting thousands of forensic interviews, and I'm summarizing the theories of researchers and the real experts. Alright, so first I'd like to thank Jimmy Kimmel for bringing up the UFO alien topic to both Clinton and Obama. It seems apparent that he has a personal interest in the subject, and his interviews have been very enlightening. Now, on the day of the Obama interview, the Los Angeles Times actually ran a story about Kimmel and whether he would ask Obama about aliens like he did Bill Clinton. The story provides readers a link to my video analysis on the former president. It's likely that Kimmel's production team picked up on the story and watched the Clinton analysis because Jimmy actually makes reference to my video during his interview with Obama.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you?
Yes, Jimmy, you're right. I am going to examine the facial expressions and every twitch. Would you expect anything less? So let's get started. Our first challenge is that we have a lot less to work with as far as material specifically addressing the UFO topic when compared to the Bill Clinton interview. The segment where Jimmy asks Obama about UFOs is less than a minute long, but Clinton conversed for nearly 3 minutes on the subject. The good news is, the total interview with President Obama is over 30 minutes, so we can draw a good baseline reading from the extra content. Let's start from the beginning of the UFO segment. You're going to see President Obama sitting with his legs crossed, much in the same manner that Bill Clinton was sitting, but Clinton liked to grip the arms of the chair. Obama places his hands in his lap. Now, while it looks like the same upholstery as from the Clinton interview, Jimmy has done some remodeling, because this is more of a love seat, so he doesn't have the option of putting his hands on the chair. Now, sitting with his legs crossed and hands in his lap is fairly common with Obama when he's being interviewed. The amount of his hand gesturing comes into play later on, but something that you'll notice right off is that Obama intently listens with his mouth open.
So this is something I feel like, if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
So what does it mean when someone listens with their mouth open? President Clinton did it a bit too in his interview. Here's some interpretations of what it can mean. A gaping mouth can indicate shock at what's being said or observed. It can mean the person is deep in thought. It can indicate general anxiety. Or it can simply be they have a nasal obstruction that requires them to get more air through the mouth. In fact, studies show that 85% of mouth breathing is an adaptation to overcome a nasal obstruction. When people breathe through their mouth, the main function is to provide their lungs more air. If you take a look at other parts of the interview and other interviews that Obama has given, you'll see that he quite frequently listens with his mouth open, including during conversations and topics where he should be relaxed. So it follows that he probably has an airway restriction, right? I mean, if you ask the First Lady, I wouldn't be surprised if we learned that the president has snoring issues. Taking this into consideration, I was about to dismiss the open mouth as immaterial to our focus. That was until I discovered something very interesting. Thanks to the wonders of high-definition television, my attention was drawn to something you can't normally measure from a TV interview: a person's rate of breathing. Normal breathing rates for an adult average between 12 to 16 breaths per minute. Anything above 20 breaths per minute is considered elevated and labeled with a medical term, tachypnea. More than 24 breaths per minute is considered a very serious condition. Basically, if our oxygen level is low or carbon dioxide level is high, our body is instructed to breathe more often. People experience an increased breathing rate for a few different reasons. Besides attributing it to exercise, since we can see the president didn't just go for a jog, their body could be responding to stress, pain, anger, or experiencing a panic attack. Let's have a look at Kimmel sets up the UFO question, and let's see if we can take a breathing rate measurement. We lose some resolution as we zoom in, but if you can look somewhere near the lapel and tie mic, you can quite easily see the chest rising and falling. Pay attention to the shallowness of the breathing as well.
My hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, yeah. And I go through everything to find out what happened. Right. Did you do that?
If you do the math at 10 breaths in 14 seconds, that works out to be an average of 42 breaths per minute. 42 breaths per minute! Certainly this can't be the case. People would end up hyperventilating if they stayed at that rate for more than a few minutes. Wouldn't we have noticed his voice giving out as if he was running out of air? Yet he sounds normal. Well, that's the point when it comes to some forms of stress breathing. The body doesn't need the oxygen yet. It only thinks that it does because it's engaging in a physiological preparation for a fight or flight response. When polygraph tests are administered, a pneumograph is used to measure breathing patterns. Moderate changes in rate or depth of breathing can indicate a stress level increase. Questions are asked with some delay between each one, but changes in breathing can swing almost instantaneously and then settle back to a normal rhythm within very short amounts of time. While I hardly believe that President Obama was experiencing a panic attack, I do consider the very real possibility that his breathing spiked to an incredible rate for a brief period because he was uncomfortable with the next line of questioning. Such fluctuations are often undetectable through the person's speech or other body communication. If some of you still aren't sure that everything I counted were actual breaths, then you can zoom in even further and find out for yourself. Even if one were to dismiss exactly half of the breaths I counted, we still end up with an average of 20 breaths per minute, which meets the medical criteria for elevated breathing. Subsequently, I find it noteworthy. That's why I searched for other interview portions to make a comparison. Here we have the president listening to Kimmel talk about Kanye West, and Kanye's claim that Obama calls him at home.
Home phone, by the way. Are you talking to?
It's a relatively light-hearted conversation without any political ramifications. We don't have time to look at more examples, but here we can see that although Obama's mouth is still open, his breathing is reduced to about 18 breaths per minute, less than half of what it was during the UFO questions. So now let's see what happens back in the UFO segment.
If I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
Instantly after Jimmy pitches the first question, Obama fires back with a joke. It was actually quite funny. I mean, to his credit, many people view our president as a very likable guy. His sense of humor is a key component to his personality. Obama is known for using humor to alleviate stressful situations. Sometimes his jokes work, and other times they suffer from very poor timing. Remember, guys, this is a talk show, and the primary purpose is entertainment, so a joke here seems very natural. However, it's also important to see how far he goes with his joke and how he's treated this subject in the past. Obama makes 3 or 4 joke statements here. Each one interrupts, delays, and deflects Kimmel's original question. Kimmel first says it's unlikely that he would ever be president. Then Obama interrupts and says, "You never know. It was unlikely that I was going to be president." Then Jimmy asks the question about looking into the files.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president. Because that's the first thing that you would do.
There we have joke number 2. He also had some stuttering in the response, but we'll come back to that. Obama is left sitting there, knowing very clearly that he hasn't answered the question. Since Kimmel continues laughing, but doesn't move on from the subject, Obama throws in a third funny comment.
It's at
The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now you know.
This is good material. So let's examine first why humor might be used in a stressful situation. If you remember the Clinton video, when the former president was asked the same question, he did a lot of rambling and often gave superfluous information. He would start a lot of sentences and explanations and then stop himself midway. This is typical of a person feeling anxiety and not wanting to resemble a deer in the headlights. Obama, on the other hand, is more particular and even-tempoed when he talks. Even though some people believe that both presidents were given the complete script of what would be asked, it's still very difficult to quickly form a sincere-sounding reply when there's high stakes at hand. Humor can often be utilized to buy time. By slipping in a joke to fill the space, it allows more time to form a proper response. Because a good laugh involves the whole face, it can be used to mask unwanted expressions that otherwise might leak through. It also functions to create what I call a verbal deflection, to belittle or distract someone directly or subtly, kind of making them feel sorry they even asked the question. Although Kimmel asked the question in a playful way, it's possible that engaging in a hyperbole like Obama just did was an attempt to influence Jimmy to drop the subject. Here's an example of how it works. A woman suspects that her husband is cheating on her with his coworker, so she corners him and says, "You didn't come home when you said you were going to last night. Are you cheating on me with that woman?" The husband thinks the stress he's feeling will give away that he's lying if he stays on the subject, so he replies, "Actually, yes, Karen and I have been seeing each other every Tuesday night for the past 5 years because we know that's the night you go grocery shopping. With all the money we've saved with cutting out coupons, I bought her a nice little timeshare cabin in the mountains, and that's where I go to meet her on Tuesdays. It's a several-hour drive, and that's why I was late getting back." By giving exaggerations, even though those details are not what the person was asking for, the suspected person deflects all the uncertainty and doubt back to the interrogator by making them feel silly for asking. And the great irony is, part of, or all of what they said in their joking may actually be true. Now let's take a look at how Obama has viewed the subject in the past. First, we have a video of the MSNBC Democratic presidential debate held in 2007 in Pennsylvania. Moderator Tim Russert had just finished grilling and mocking Representative Dennis Kucinich about a UFO sighting he reported. Then he turned to then-candidate Senator Obama and asked him the following.
The 3 astronauts of Apollo 11 who went to the moon back in 1969 all said that they believe there is life beyond Earth. Do you agree?
You know, I don't know, and I don't presume to know. What I know is there is life here on Earth, and that we're not attending to life here on Earth. We're not taking care of kids who are alive and unfortunately are not getting health care. We're not taking care of senior citizens who are alive and are seeing their heating prices go up. So as president, those are the people I will be attending to first. There may be some other folks on their way.
Notice how quickly he dismisses the subject and diminishes the importance of such a universally important question. Like a good politician, he turned the attention back to his campaign platform and avoided the negative stigma attached to those in the public eye who share too much about their beliefs in extraterrestrial life. He, in fact, motioned over to Kucinich as if to say, "I'll leave the crazy subject of UFOs to this guy." This brings up a good question. Does Obama use humor when talking about the UFO or alien subjects because he's uncomfortable in telling the truth about what he may know? Or is it because of the fear of being ridiculed if he appears to take the subject seriously? And might he know more now than he did before he was president? To help me answer this, I turned to my friend Lee Spiegel, a reporter for the Huffington Post. We work together often when he asks my opinion on UFO and Bigfoot videos for his stories. Lee has been deeply involved in researching the UFO subject ever since the early 1970s. He was even involved in organizing the official hearing on UFOs held at the United Nations in 1978. I asked Lee what he knew about President Obama's use of humor in regards to the UFO subject.
Early example of when Obama maybe goofed, thinking that he could say things and not really mean them and people would laugh it off, was a couple of years ago in 2012. He made a trip to Roswell, of all places, the legendary home of the fabled 1947 UFO crash. And apparently there were microphones set up on the airfield where he came in on a helicopter, and a crowd of people had gathered to see him. And for all the world to see, he got in front of the microphone and he said, well, you know, we arrived here by helicopter and we got to Roswell, and the first thing I said to the people was, I come in peace. So when he said that, everybody kind of knew what he was talking about. He was being a little tongue-in-cheek, and you could hear laughter in the people who had gathered around.
It was a wonderful trip over here. We took the helicopter. We had landed in Roswell. I announced to people when I landed that I had come in peace. Let me tell you, there are more 9 and 10-year-old boys around the country. When I meet them, they ask me, have you been to Roswell? And is it true what they say? And I tell them, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. So, and their eyes get all big, you know, so we're going to keep our secrets here.
And you might expect that the crowd would have given like an uproarious laughter, but they didn't. Maybe 1 or 2 people tried to chuckle, but he was all smiles, you know, as if to say, wasn't that a funny, clever thing that I tried to just say to you? But nobody really thought it was funny. How could a president of the United States make a joke like that using 9 or 10-year-olds as his target and actually saying, I will have to kill you if I tell you? Are you kidding, Mr. President?
And I tell him, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
My sentiments are the same as Lee when it comes to Obama's joke. Telling 9 and 10-year-old boys that you'd have to kill them if you told them UFO secrets? It's a bit much. We do have to consider that maybe his speechwriter wrote the joke, but available information indicates that it's certainly possible that Obama views the UFO subject with a degree of contempt. It's obvious that he's not comfortable with it. Why? We don't know. All of the incidents I could find where he speaks about it were dismissive in nature or laced with derision. Until now.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really?
Guys, this is huge. It's really quite extraordinary what just happened here. Bear with me and let's break this down. First, let's start with what the body is saying, and then we'll get into the actual words. We're coming right after 3 or so joke statements by Obama, and he still hasn't answered Kimmel's question. Jimmy would make a good lawyer. Without being swayed by the distraction and humor, Jimmy redirects the question to the president, more or less reminds him that it's important to tell the truth, kind of like an attorney would remind someone who's on the stand. Then he asks him, so, did you look? Did you see? Did you explore? Almost immediately, you're going to see Obama do a series of things that paint a very interesting picture. In totality, they create a demeanor shift as great, if not greater, than what we saw in segments of Bill Clinton's interview. I want you to notice the stark contrast of what I call guarded Obama to what we just saw seconds earlier from comedian Obama. The first thing that happens is the smile, or what I'll call the genuine smile, disappears. He still has a faint grin, but it's just sort of a clear look of annoyance. True smiles involve the corners of the mouth and especially more expression with the eyes. The eyes typically sparkle, and we see more crunching and creases around the folds in the corners. Throughout most of the president's interview, I would say that Obama's smiles look genuine. He really appears to be having a good time. As soon as Kimmel finishes his question, however, the president makes some movements with his mouth to almost completely extinguish a smile as he closes his eyes twice and looks away before answering. Now, most people know something about eye contact and how it can be associated to telling lies or feeling nervousness. People who tell lies or feel stress will often look away more while answering crucial questions. It's not quite that simple, however. To get a complete understanding of what this might mean, we should look at how Obama answers questions in other interviews.
Yeah, if you think about the progress we've made on things like seat belts, smoking cessation, which I know a little bit about,
if you were to sift through dozens and dozens of Obama interviews like I did, you'd quickly find that it's very typical for Obama to look down and to his right during interviews. In fact, he spends about 50% of his time looking down and not making eye contact with the interviewer. Does that mean he's being deceptive or feeling highly stressed 50% of the time? No, I don't think you could draw that conclusion. Instead, this seems to be a byproduct of his cognitive process when he requires precision in answering difficult questions. For those who watched the Clinton analysis, we talked about neurolinguistic programming and the research that brought us something called eye accessing cues. Basically, the direction a person looks when they're recounting a story and giving information can give us some insight as to what's going on in their mind. Here's the chart that gives a basic overview, and as you can see, when a person looks down and to the right, they're generally checking out their feelings and connected to something that sways them with some emotion. Down and to their left, or our right, generally means they're having an internal dialogue. This is our inner voice that we always consult. It helps us communicate exactly how we want to be perceived. Many people go to this corner of their mind when they need to speak with precision. This tends to make perfect sense, because just like Clinton, President Obama is left-handed. As you may remember from the other video, left-handed people tend to exhibit the eye accessing cues completely opposite than right-handed people. In other words, when Obama looks down into his right, it's very probable that he's accessing his internal dialogue. Doing so makes it easier for him to more clearly communicate his thoughts precisely. Now, does this mean that Obama averting his eyes has no significance to the question that Kimmel just asked? No, it doesn't make the eye contact concern irrelevant. However, I'm far more interested that Obama literally shuts his eyes to this whole discussion, not once but twice in less than 2 seconds. These are long closures, longer than the average blink of 3 to 4/10 of a second. And he hasn't even answered yet. When a person rubs, covers, or closes their eyes for longer than a blink, this can indicate that they're trying to keep out certain unpleasant auditory or visual cues. We do it symbolically to protect the mind from experiencing or reliving an undesirable or threatening thought. Do you remember that Bill Clinton did nearly exactly the same thing when he was asked similar questions by Kimmel? But what's most interesting isn't just the closing of the eyes. All of this is accompanied by a hard swallow, a flexing of the jaw, a head turn away from Jimmy, and shaking the head no as he stutters and says, I can't reveal anything.
And of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really?
Obama makes the no head shake with a stutter, similar to a guy who just told his buddies he can't join them on a fishing trip because his wife told him he needs to clean the garage. I sense some frustration that it's out of his control, and it's clear he's not open to offering any details as to why. Just like the husband who would be in trouble for bad-mouthing his wife to his buddies, there's a sense of duty that says, I can't betray my trust. The demeanor shift is very clear. The smile is wiped from his face. This is no longer a joking matter. Even the way he says his reply is softer and less audible. People have a tendency to talk very softly or mumble things more often in the parts where they're stressed or not confident in how it will be received. I even had to turn my volume up to hear his response clearly. I had mentioned a hard swallow. A common sign of insecurity or fear is increased swallowing or clearing of the throat. Once the adrenaline starts going, it increases saliva production for a short period of time and then it dries up. To clear the saliva, often people swallow more noticeably than normal because they're very conscious of the body change. What about the stutter? Does it mean anything when Obama stutters his reply? The exact cause of stuttering is not known. It may be a combination of genetic and learned behavior. But does Obama stutter frequently in other situations? You only need to watch a few interviews to see that stuttering is a common speech pattern and challenge for the president.
This all dates back to...
I mean, how mad were you?
Pretty mad. I mean, look, Secret Service, it has been a while. I won't lie about that. He's the black sheep in the family. You know?
Are you having conversations with Kanye?
I've met Kanye twice.
You get the point. So if he stutters quite frequently, should we dismiss it as irrelevant? What we do know is that stress increases the likelihood of stuttering, and it aggravates the stuttering that was already present. We also have the jaw flex. As before with Clinton, we notice a flexing of the jaw, which is often seen as a releasing of tension by using it as a self-soothing gesture when anxiety increases. The jaw flex seems to be most prevalent during specific conversations where some of the other red flags of stress are present. So by itself, one stutter doesn't mean much of anything. One swallow doesn't mean the person is stressed, just like one flex of the jaw. But when it's combined with a drastic demeanor shift, elevated breathing, verbal deflections, and averting the eyes all right before he finally answers, the emerging pattern starts to tell us an interesting story. I think Jimmy sensed this too, because before he moves on, he jumps in one more time.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, you know, that's what we're instructed to say.
All right.
When Jimmy says, "Oh, really?" Obama immediately responds with a head nod yes, and a third and very deliberate shutting of his eyes before he makes a final joke statement and reverts back to comedian Obama. The demeanor shift is undeniable as to when he's using humor and when he's speaking with a serious intent. The head nod is all Obama needed to make to convey to Jimmy that he's serious. The yes with the closing eyes further validates that it's genuine. A deceptive person may hesitate before nodding when giving an answer. A truthful person tends to nod in support of a statement or answer at the same time it's being given. We see no delay here between the nod, further supporting that the president is no longer joking and he can't talk about it. When he shuts his eyes, I kind of get a sense that there's some great emotion behind it. Maybe some resignation because it's been a physically draining ordeal. As an example, let's say you approach your friend and say, "I heard your boss chewed you out today." Your friend lowers his head and nods yes as he closes his eyes, as if trying to shield himself from reliving the seriousness and stress of the conversation with his boss. This is one possible interpretation that I'm sensing from Obama. Moving on. Now let's suppose you disagree with every body language interpretation that's been presented as a possibility thus far. That's okay. My job is not to sway or convince you of anything. I'm just presenting an alternative view of what might have seemed like nothing more than an entertaining interview to most people. But for those of you who see nothing to this, I've saved the best for last. Up until now, we've looked exclusively at how Obama has communicated. Now in the last few minutes, we're going to look at the actual words of what he communicated. Believe me, it's just as intriguing when you break it down. First of all, many major news sources provided inaccurate information in giving a summary of Obama's discussion of UFOs. Sorry, Jimmy, but even your social media content producers got it wrong. From the Jimmy Kimmel Live YouTube channel, we find a headline, "President Barack Obama denies knowledge of aliens." It amazes me how many in the news media glance over headlines like this or even watch the interview and go along with the same conclusion when it simply isn't accurate. Now that you guys have seen the interview multiple times, can you tell me the part where he denies knowledge of aliens? There is no actual denial of knowledge here. What he is denying is giving the public access to the details of his knowledge or involvement in the matter. He's not denying any efforts he may have taken into exploring the subject. He's not denying being briefed on possible knowledge of alien existence. He's not denying having seen documents or evidence. He simply says, "I can't reveal anything." This is quite an interesting phrase coming from a president. So I turned to Robbie Graham, a UFO and film studies scholar in the UK. In researching his new book, Silver Screen Saucers, Robbie has become one of the most knowledgeable people in ufology when it comes to what every U.S. president has or hasn't said about UFOs and aliens.
So President Clinton has in the past made statements publicly to the effect that he has a historical interest in the UFO phenomenon, and he has made efforts, in fact, to actually dig out secrets from government files, specifically relating to Area 51 and Roswell, for example. Now, both of Clinton's statements in the past on this issue, and they were very, very clear statements, give the impression that while he attempted to dig out these secrets, he was unsuccessful in doing so, and therefore he literally has no knowledge to divulge to the public. Obama's statement, on the other hand, if we are to take it at face value and not as a joke, implies something different. I can't reveal anything implies at least some direct knowledge on the president's part. But it also implies a lack of legal authority to publicly divulge that knowledge. So that in turn implies that he, the president, he's not the top dog, rather, where the UFO subject is concerned, that he's answerable to others on the issue. Now, to my knowledge, Obama is the only president to date to have said that he specifically can't reveal UFO information.
He could have said, it's just not that important of a subject to waste time on right now. Or, yes, I did look, but didn't find anything. That's exactly what Bill Clinton said anyways, and that's why Jimmy redirected his question, because he found it an odd response. He could have said, I asked, but I'm still looking into it. But he didn't. He said, I can't reveal anything. Now, I can already predict the comments from some of you saying he just used the word can't in the broad context of, I'm able to talk about it, but there's nothing there to reveal. Well, interestingly enough, in the same interview, the president clarifies for us very nicely what he means when he can't do something, and that he understands the difference between can't and being able or allowed to do something. In a different segment, Jimmy asks Obama if he can drive a car at the White House.
Do you ever drive?
I cannot drive. I mean, I'm I'm able to drive.
He then goes on to explain how the Secret Service became very concerned when he once borrowed someone's car. He drove around the White House parking lot, and how he wasn't allowed to leave the gate. There you have it. In Obama's own words, which he chooses precisely here and is conscious of their meaning, he says can't means he is not permitted or allowed. It doesn't mean he's not capable of doing something. Can't means not allowed. Things get more interesting when we take a look at the background surrounding this Kimmel interview in March. Specifically, we should look at a connection involving one of Obama's top advisors, Mr. John Podesta. I reached out to Bryce Zabel, who recently wrote an article that gained quite a bit of attention about Podesta and his interest in UFO disclosure. Bryce is a former CNN correspondent, Hollywood producer, and the co-author of the book AD, After Disclosure, which looks at hypothetical scenarios in a post-UFO disclosure world.
Well, let's start off, Ben, by explaining that John Podesta is not just your average guy. This is a man who was Bill Clinton's chief of staff during his last term in office. He's a man who Barack Obama picked to be the leader of his transition team and who came aboard in the last year of this Obama administration as a senior advisor. He's left the Obama administration in order to work on the Clinton campaign, the Hillary Clinton campaign. So he's a man who's a deep Washington insider. And what makes him very interesting is that on his last day as an Obama senior advisor, he tweeted the top 10 things that he remembered about his last year. And the top of the top 10 was his regret at failing to achieve UFO disclosure. Now, a lot of people said, well, okay, that's a joke. But it's not a joke if you know anything about John Podesta. He is a man who has aggressively sought UFO secrecy being ended. He did this as recently as 2000, or originally in 2002, when he went before the National Press Club. And I just want to read you what John Podesta said. He told the National Press Club in 2002, after having been Bill Clinton's chief of staff, quote, "It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it, quite frankly, because the American people can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law." This is a man who knows what he's talking about. And what he's been talking about consistently since 2002 has been UFO disclosure. So he leaves the White House a month ago with a tweet that basically says, my biggest regret of the last year has been not achieving UFO disclosure. And to me, that raises one really big question. If you regret not having achieved it, and the one guy that you're working for is the President of the United States, I presume that means you talked to him about it. I'd like to know what Obama said. I'd like to know if it's a coincidence that Obama's on a show like Jimmy Kimmel talking about it right now. I'd like to know what was said between these two men on this issue that's not a joke, but is an important issue that faces our country. I've got questions. They might have answers.
So is it beyond the realm of possibility that during that full year, at some point Podesta encouraged Obama or was sent on errands for him to secure that disclosure? Furthermore, if he tried, why wasn't he able to achieve his goal? Was the president not interested? Or did the president support him in his efforts and he too was unsuccessful? Where were the roadblocks? These kind of public statements, whether it's on Twitter or a late-night talk show, they're not made in a vacuum. We might want to question whether the timing of Podesta's statement and Obama's reluctance to talk about anything is simply coincidental, or if there really is something to this backstory. Before we finish, I wanted to revisit this single sentence spoken by President Obama.
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really?
Let's suppose for a minute that Obama's White House had already officially looked into the UFO subject and publicly declared that there was no evidence to support the existence of an extraterrestrial presence visiting Earth. If such a thing had happened, then wouldn't it be an odd answer to say, I can't reveal anything? As mentioned earlier, shouldn't the answer be, we already looked into it and we didn't find anything? After all, if there's no evidence there and we already told you there's no evidence, then why would I say, I can't talk about it? Oops. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened. In response to a petition for UFO disclosure, Obama's administration made an official statement on November 4th, 2011, denying that the U.S. government has hidden knowledge or evidence of an extraterrestrial presence. Looks like someone needs to get their story straight. I talked with Stephen Bassett, a UFO disclosure lobbyist, organizer of the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, and founder of the Paradigm Research Group that seeks for congressional hearings on the UFO subject.
That petition still is on the White House website, along with the response that came on November the 4th. That response was a milestone event. It had never happened before. It's the first time in history that the White House had ever put its position in writing on the extraterrestrial issue, which is notable on many levels. The response was remarkable in that it denied everything. No evidence for life, no evidence for extraterrestrial engagement, no evidence the government's hidden anything. All of which are completely false.
In light of this, why would Obama make such a statement to Kimmel? We've pretty much established that the nonverbal evidence supports he wasn't joking when he spoke this single sentence. We've also shown what he means by using the word can't. It's also clear that he's not denying any involvement in inquiries or knowledge. We don't have to insert a slew of videos here to remind everyone the president's official viewpoint on transparency. One video works just fine.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
This isn't meant as a criticism against the president. In fact, I kind of admire what he did in this situation. If it truly is a matter of national security or higher powers in the military-industrial complex that prevent him from talking about his efforts or possible knowledge on the subject, then he chose to be upfront with the American people by saying he can't talk about it. He could have taken the safer route and just referred back to the White House's previous statement that they looked into it and there was nothing hidden. At least in this sense, he didn't lie. He certainly didn't deny he had knowledge either, despite what many in the press reported. So what's the bottom line? What does it all mean? If we were to just isolate this interview from everything else, I think there's good evidence to suggest that, like Bill Clinton, Obama is not at ease with the UFO subject. Undeniably, he's not comfortable talking about it. He told us himself he's absolutely refused to give any further details about his knowledge or efforts to explore the subject. His nonverbal communication suggests a state of physiological arousal caused by stress and/or anxiety when he's pinned down to give accountability of what he may know. I think it's very possible that he's using humor to relieve some of that stress and also as a verbal deflection to avoid discussing the subject. Did he lie during the statements that we generally believe were jokes, or was there any truth to them? The laughing and joking may be effectively masking more subtle reactions that are too difficult to read. At best, that section of analysis is inconclusive. However, when it comes to the relevant question, where he finally answers, I can't reveal anything, the resulting demeanor shift is unmistakable. This is a serious matter for Obama, and everything points to supporting that he truly is not permitted to discuss it. Now, that doesn't mean he personally knows anything about an extraterrestrial presence. It means that the details of who he talked to, why, and when are not for public disclosure. A broader picture emerges when this interview is taken in the larger context of John Podesta's recent departure from the White House, his tweet, and comments from Bill Clinton last year. I can't reveal anything. His White House already said there is nothing to reveal. Did he forget the 2011 response, Or did he come across new information that changes everything? All the evidence suggests that there is something to reveal. Whatever it is, we hope that one day it will be. Thank you everyone for watching to the end. Your comments are always appreciated. Please be respectful of others' opinions and be courteous in your discourse. Thank you, Jimmy, for your interviews, and President Obama for allowing the public to see that there is a serious nature to this subject. Always stay curious, and you'll never be bored.